Morning folks, and welcome to the Fire Authority HR Committee. Have you had any apologies for absence?
I have apologies, Chair, from Councillor Battlematch.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? No? Can we have a look at the minutes of the last meeting? Have we got any matters of accuracy? No?
Not for me.
Any matters arising? No? We good? They're agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the first item 4, which is the Human Resources Update Report from the Chief Fire Officer. Are you, Leila?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the routine quarterly report which is presented to members containing the HR metrics. So I'll pass over to Amy and she'll talk us through the report. What I propose is, because it's quite a lengthy report with a lot of data, we'll pause after each section for any questions like we did at the previous meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, we'll take the sections and allow time for us to kind of reflect on what is said within these. I have provided more information around sickness absence because that was requested at the last meeting. So there are a few tables in here which might need a little explanation, and I'm happy to take questions as we go through as well. So the additional information is also provided around the occupational health and fitness services later on, so we can discuss that. And then touch on the employee relations at the end, which is only 1 quarter's data, so there's not a lot in there to kind of dig at. So members will be aware that this information should be received on a quarterly basis. You received a lot of it at the last meeting, so my apologies for that. This really focuses on 1 quarter, but in order to do that sickness deep dive, we've looked at 2 quarters for that information. So the whole time establishment remains at 432. We currently have 13 posts below that approved level, so we are standing at 419. We took the deliberate decision prior to the last budget agreement to maintain the level that we were at and to delay the whole time course. That has led to a lower level of establishment than we would ideally want to operate in. But we had 11 whole-time trainees successfully complete their basic training course in December, and those individuals are now out on the run. And it's just really a way of us managing that budget uncertainty to make sure we're ready for the next year. We've also got recruitment activity well underway. We are continuing those interviews. They go on till Wednesday next week, with a firefighters course planned for April and a further one planned for the later in the year, subject to the financial agreement of the £5 precept. So the figure 1 illustrates the whole time establishment versus the actual numbers, and you can see there's not a great deal of fluctuation in there. When we come on to turnover, I think that will explain that as well. We did also recruit for on-call firefighters throughout the last year, and we've seen 11 of those start their training course in January and are progressing well within that course, expected to come out of training school in April 2026. This issue around on-call, which we measure in units rather than whole time, which we measure in individuals, we do have slightly lower on-call units available than we would like. That's a reflection of longer-term pressure around the on-call sector that we see in lots and lots of fire services across the country. And it makes our sickness work that we're doing later really important in trying to retain and bring people back from long-term sickness. So I can talk about that a bit later. Moving on to Green Book posts, those are all the colleagues that are on local government terms and conditions. So perhaps traditionally referred to as support staff, but they also include prevention and protection colleagues who are very much front-facing service delivery colleagues. So again, Green Book establishment slightly above where our establishment is, and that's where we've made additional recruitment reasons around things like the Grenfell uplift, where we've got additional funding to do fire protection activity, and where we've got the option to backfill a day duty role which is vacant with a short-term Green Book role, so replacing an operational firefighter with a member of staff dedicated to that for a short period just to get us through this transition. We've done that as well, so that's really to take the pressure off and make sure that our firefighters are where they need to be. Looking at turnover across all 3 groups, it's relatively static, and what we see is a small amount of turnover, which hopefully is a reflection of the great jobs that we provide, but also a kind of broadly even split between those being retirement and individuals who've resigned to take up another job elsewhere. So I'll just pause there if there's any questions around establishment or turnover.
Any questions, colleagues? No, we good? Oh, no, sorry, John.
I don't think it's going to be a long meeting, this, is it?
Next week's meeting.
Are you going to tell me to stop being enthusiastic? Paragraph 2.3. Could you just, it says, absence or managerial action. That kind of ambiguous. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, it is deliberately ambiguous.
So, of those 28 posts, there'll be vacancies for a number of reasons, either sickness absence, a very small number of staff who are suspended for awaiting misconduct outcomes, and then the other thing that causes gaps in the ridership is where we've got temporary promotions further up the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Obviously people will move up to fill those temporarily, and then that leaves the gap in the firefighter posts at the bottom. So those 28 posts are made up really of those three main factors.
Right. So it was ambiguous. But yeah, it covers all of those three. You also said, when you started, Amy, that the decision was made to stay at the current recruitment level. So are we actively keeping us below the approved establishment?
So last financial year, because the way that our budget is made up, about 80% of the costs to the authority are staffing costs. And because we don't get our final approved budget until February, the only way we have of managing in-year savings is to run, or one of the limited ways that we have is to run temporarily under establishment whilst we understand what our budget's going to be for the year. So the whole time course, which we started in September, ideally we would have liked to start that in April, but we didn't know if we were going to be have enough money to be able to afford to run it or not. And what we didn't want to do is to bring people into the organisation and then potentially to also be in a redundancy situation at the same time.
Yeah.
So we took that known decision to push that back. Hopefully with the rolling 3-year budget settlement that we've now got from government, it helps us to plan over the medium term. So we've got a course planned for April, and depending on the budget decision that's made in February by members, we'll run a second course in September, and that will take us then back up to full establishment on the whole time ridership.
Cool. One more, then I'll shut up.
That's all right.
This is just for my own knowledge. The on-call training and full-time training, does it differ in any way?
No.
Is there a route for on-call people to move into full-time? That is an established route?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a few every year, don't we? I think there's been 3 or 4 this year.
So we try to balance between bringing new people into the organisation, and then we also run what we call an on-call migration process, where people can
That's
migrate
exactly what
into
I've
the
read,
hospital.
and they migrate.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Is that okay, colleagues? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take us on, Chair, thank you. So the sickness absence, the deep dive, as we've described it, talks through some additional detail around where it was work-related and some kind of digging into the types of illnesses and issues that people are suffering from and what we're doing about it. Just a particular caveat to this report, just because of the timing of it, the data was produced very close to the end of Q3. That might mean that this data changes slightly when you next see the report, because sickness absences might have been closed down, or when they come to their return to work, they say, oh, it wasn't that, it was this. Those kind of little niggles in the system really mean that we've got quite raw data at this stage. The overall picture hasn't changed a great deal from Q2, so the kind of narrative and explanation remains very, very much consistent. We also moved from a central to a local line management responsibility for reporting and recording sickness absence in the last quarter, so that might have caused some anomalies. But that's part of our ongoing support to managers and to individuals to make sure that that manager and employee relationship is really strong and that the welfare and support that they're providing is timely. So now you call your manager to explain that you're going to be off sick, how long you might be off sick for and what you're dealing with. Your manager can offer instant support and explain things, whereas before you would have called the central line and had it recorded and then had a later conversation with your manager. So it's kind of a behaviour change nudge, I guess, that we're putting in place there. So the service does have sickness thresholds and targets that we try to keep our sickness under. Those are explained at 2.13. The national picture does indicate that sickness absence across all sectors is increasing, with researchers really attributing this to an increase in mental ill health and musculoskeletal issues, and that is reflected within all of our cohorts. This might be linked to pressures within the health service or to an ageing workforce. And the CIPD survey, September 2025, indicates that the UK as a whole was reporting increased sickness, with the average increase from 7.8 days in 2023 to 9.4 days on average in 2025. The public sector average is actually running at 13.3 days, so that is a significant increase from previous years. So looking through our individual staff groups, if we take whole time first, you can see in figure 7 that we are now running broadly in line with the same quarter as last year. It's kind of similar rates on that rolling comparator basis. And the local issues really around whole time sickness are reflected on the next page along. So we have had a sustained focus on sickness absence management via our strategic absence review group. This meets quarterly and is chaired by the Assistant Chief, Leela. It really provides targeted intervention by managers to support and then ensure that occupational health are well involved with these long-term and complex cases in particular. So you can see we had a peak in the last quarter and then it has come down. We are still tracking both above our target and above where we were last year, but it is starting to come down. When you get into the detail of that on figure 9, which is on page 16, I believe, in your report pack, we can see that musculoskeletal absence does remain our leading cause of absence, but the days lost has reduced on the previous quarter. We also saw a kind of seasonal blip with 156 shifts lost due to seasonal flu and colds. The other issue which is accounting for significant absence is post-operative sickness, and some of that is attributable to people waiting for hospital treatment and then the time that it is taking to access recovery services and then to get back to full strength. Now we know, as you're well aware, firefighting is a physically demanding job, so returning to the workplace means returning with a good level of fitness. We have seen that quite a small number of long-term cases attributed to 57% of those lost shifts. So while there is some short-term absence, it is really those long-term absences that we need to get under and which we are working to try to resolve. Members asked particularly about work-related injury within that, and actually in musculoskeletal illness that wasn't one of the concerns, that wasn't really there. So work-related sickness wasn't attributable. The caveat with that, I guess, is if you do a manual job all through your life and you might have joined us from another manual job or from the forces, wear and tear doesn't tend to be attributable under that. It's more illness or something, an injury that we could be investigating and understanding the cause of. Having said that, we are well aware that this is a very physically intense job, and where we can, you'll note through other sources that we are looking at equipment, so we're rolling out improvements around our bariatric rescue capability that will reduce the physical load on any individual. So understanding where we can, we are making sure that our facilities and our engineering solutions try to reduce the physical strain on individuals. Moving further down, the analysis around the hospital and post-operative category indicates that a small number of colleagues with very serious and long-term illness account for the majority of these absences. The focus on those individuals is really working collaboratively with their NHS specialist or consultant to understand if and when they might return to full operative duties. Again, not work-related, but we do have 3 long-term absent people in that category, of which one has now returned to work, and we're working really closely with the other 2. Members asked particularly around the cost of lost time, I guess, for these individuals. It's quite difficult to calculate because we will use detachments and other things to make sure that we are maintaining our operational capability. But for a kind of broad brush understanding, an individual firefighter with on-costs costs us around £50,000 a year. So the true reflection of the cost of all these different types of individuals is in overtime shifts, detachments, and the support that we are providing. So it is quite a difficult number to provide. And around Green Book, it would be in lost productivity because we don't tend to make up behind those individuals in the same way. Mental health did feature in the top 3 categories for absence for whole time within Q2. When we reviewed the absence in that period, it indicated that a total of 19 absences were long-term within there. Mental health was 19 of those absences. All of those have now returned to work, and 6 of those were categorised as long-term. We were able to make use of the Firefighters Charity to support one of those individuals with a full residential. We've worked really hard with those individuals to get them back into work. In Q3, that meant that mental health absence has actually dropped to the 4th absence, so it's come off your chart, but it still remains there as quite a significant cause of absence, with 118 shifts lost. We will come back to wellbeing a little later. I don't know whether you want me to pause there or keep going to the on-call.
No, we can pause there. I think 'cause we did ask for some of these stats, particularly, didn't we, to look for trends in mental health, whether they're in teams as well as the cost, if your colleagues remember last time. Has anyone got any questions or points they'd like to raise? Andy?
Yeah, looking at figure 9, second book we've got 90 off with mental health, and on the second quarter it rose to 307. Is there any reason for that?
So that it's shifts lost rather than individuals. So it might be that we do know that we had a few individuals who were off for quite a long time with mental health, and it sort of skews the figures, I guess. And I don't know whether there's more.
I think when you look at absence data, looking at it per quarter, it adds some value, but it needs to come with a bit of a health warning, excuse the pun, in terms of you will from time to time see short-term anomalies in the data. And I think with regards to mental health, it's 2 things. One, it's a bit of a blip, for want of a better term, because we can see it's come down. And I think the second thing that's been happening is in Q1, some of those individuals went off. They then stayed off for some or all of Q2. So those long-term absences, when you're looking at them in a relatively small staff group, it will soon start to look like a disproportionately big impact in the data. So I think there's 2 things at play there with what's been happening in Q2.
Thank you. Wendy?
So, does stress-related come under mental health? Yeah.
Sorry.
Stress-related.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Anything I want to point out here, we're talking about whether there's the dual recording of this with on-call, whole time, etc. on 2.26. Have we got any issues with dual reporting on here, or does that skew the stats?
Yeah.
A lot, right, okay.
So I'll come into it more. It skews the stats even more in on-call because it's a smaller group of people offering more hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Could I just ask on 2.23 on mental health, we're talking about the reduced level of absence, but and then we say it remains an area of focus. So what do we mean by that? Is it just sort of a deeper diving into the reasons, whether there's a work-related pattern? I appreciate there's only one reported here, or life in general. What do we mean?
I think what we're seeing across all of our workforce is that increased willingness to raise these concerns, and we want to make sure that we've got the right support in place for them. We know that it can be a demanding and psychologically demanding job. A lot of our staff see distressing things in the nature of their work, So we are really focused on making sure that our wellbeing support is right, that we are doing really good debriefs and supporting individuals, and we're improving our wellbeing policy over the next year as well to make sure that all of our staff have got the right training, particularly managers, in picking up those kind of concerns. Some of it's just life, and everybody is, you know, there's a lot of mental ill health across the nation and people looking for those kind of support avenues, and we want to be there for those. So we do provide our employee access programme, which is around life events and grief and those kind of day-to-day stresses, I guess. But I didn't want to lose the fact that despite the numbers have come down, we still want to maintain that focus. Yeah.
Wendy?
Thank you. Mine's more of a comment, and it just follows what Richard said there, in that in terms of the training provided for leaders and managers, that's really, really important because it's about almost a cultural shift as well, isn't it? That people feel able to open up and speak to line managers and their leaders if they are struggling, whether it be inside of work or outside of work, and it's fostering that culture. And that can be, you can't actually foster that culture overnight, can you?
And I think it's twofold, that, because what we're also looking at the moment is making sure that line managers can identify from a post-incident support perspective if somebody's seen or experienced trauma as part of their role. We've obviously got duty of care to that individual, and helping line managers to determine what's, for want of a better word, expected and normal, and when that starts to become unusual and a sign that somebody maybe needs some support or intervention. But I think the same thing goes whether it's work related or not, spotting the signs and signals that somebody potentially needs some support and knowing how to do that in a compassionate way and where to signpost people.
Yeah, I was going to say it is the signposting, isn't it? Because a manager or leader can do so much, but then if it's becoming professional counselling, then
that's it.
Yeah, you need to kind of back off and let the professional help that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right, I'll take us on to on-call sickness. So if you look at figure 10, it really shows us that significantly we're above target and higher than this period last year. When we looked at the analysis of that data, it showed that 90% of those who were sick of those last shifts in quarter 3 were attributable to long-term illness. That means our focus is really working closely with those NHS specialists and with our occupational health team to find the route back to work for those individuals. Unfortunately, some will not return to work, and that will mean looking at either the capability process or, for those who are on dual contract, our ill health retirement arrangements. Some of these individuals are the same individuals you've just seen in the whole time report. So they are the same individuals suffering the same illness and receiving the same support from us. It is above where we would like it to be. We need to be really careful in how we manage and support these individuals because we still have an issue recruiting on call. So we want to make sure that we are really supporting them back if that is a viable option for them. So, as I've said, we do see these recorded in both data sets. When we dig into the kind of issues that they are suffering from, there's, again, a big focus on musculoskeletal concerns. And we did have one work-related in the short-term category, musculoskeletal injury there. That has been put through our investigation process to determine any learning and to make sure it doesn't happen again. We have 6 employees who are long-term absent from the previous quarter who stay in this quarter with musculoskeletal concerns. Those are the ones that are kind of showing in both of those blue patterns there. In terms of the shifts lost to hospital and post-operative sickness, we also saw an increase on the previous quarter, with those absences making up 6 occurrences, with 2 individuals being dual contract employees, so that again their absences recorded twice. Mental health was the 3rd highest reason and has remained broadly stable across this cohort in the top 3 reasons for the last 2 quarters. Shall I pause there again?
Yep, can do, of course. Any questions about on-call, folks?
Yes, I think I should know this, but I can't remember. It's a procedural thing. But when you have an on-call crew or officer who goes off for sick for whatever reason, sometimes it's an unexpected. How do we manage the running of the on-call service there? Because at the end of the day, they're an on-call person. You see what I'm saying? If unplanned absence, there's not many of them. Does it have an impact on the? I'm sure it doesn't, but we do manage it, don't we? Or how do we manage it?
Yeah.
So the impact that you see will depend on the station. So I know you'll be aware from the Community Safety Committee about the differences that we've got in the establishment depending on which on-call section we're talking about.
Yeah.
So where you've got an absence that's occurred at a section that potentially has lower on-call firefighter numbers to start with, there is the potential that will have an impact on the availability of that fire appliance. And particularly you would see that if the absence is a supervisory manager, because there don't tend to be many of those on each section, and potentially drivers as well. So there is a risk that it will have an impact on appliance availability depending on where the sickness absence is occurring.
That's why it's so important to be on top of this.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know, I can't shy away from the fact that the numbers are not where we would want to be with regards to on-call absence, and we've got our strategic absence review group meeting next week, so it will be the thing that I'll be focusing on in that meeting.
It's got to be difficult, hasn't it? Because, I mean, obviously we've got challenges in terms of recruitment and retention there, particularly in areas.
Yeah.
We looked at Southall and various other areas, didn't we, in particular? Yeah. Anything else, colleagues? No, thank you.
Moving on to better news, I think. Sickness absence trends across Green Book are positive. Following that kind of sustained intervention that was described in the last report, we are now tracking both below the national average and below the same period last year. We did see an increase in sickness over the kind of Christmas period, but that was largely down to seasonal illness. When we look at the detail of what the makeup is, again, fairly even split this time between musculoskeletal, hospital and post-operative, and mental health. Looking in a bit more detail at Q3's absence, we can see that there are still 5 people long-term sick. Those, again, are a key focus, making sure those individuals are back in work. And there was 1 work-related long-term sickness and 1 work-related short-term sickness within that cohort. If I just take us through, and I'm sure members have heard a lot of this before, but we do have a really comprehensive policy framework in place to manage and support staff who are off with sickness, but also to try to prevent injury and ensure that our rehabilitation is as efficient as possible. That includes the use of our dedicated fitness advisor, access to gyms at all of our stations, and a cashback health plan which enables people to access private physiotherapy and then claim it back. All operational colleagues do undertake an annual fitness test and are supported by the fitness advisor as well as a network of station-based physical training instructors. Where physical injuries and illnesses do occur, managers are referring to our occupational health team to ensure coordinated support. That occupational health team will look at how they can return that individual to their full duties as soon as possible. That might include a referral to physiotherapy services or rehabilitation services like those funded by the Firefighters Charity. In terms of mental health and wellbeing counsellors, we do have access to online support and 24/7 interactive tools within it that are on the web-based, looking at things like bereavement, domestic stress and financial concerns. But where those mental health issues are impacting on an individual at work, managers are able to refer through the service's mental health trained occupational health nurse, who can also facilitate specialist psychological therapies and counselling services. And we've had really good feedback from our condition management company and the support that they've been able to provide the kind of small number of colleagues who've been through that process. And I think some of that is shown in the return, particularly whole-time colleagues who've been able to get back to work. So again, pause.
Okay. Any questions there, colleagues? No? I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, well, the last section relates to 1 quarter's worth of employee relations data. This is relatively low numbers, so it's quite difficult to pull meaningful trends and patterns out of the data, but members do receive a detailed report on that. So you'll get that annualised data, which will give you more information. To support the implementation, and that's due to the changes that we made following the inspectorate's report around standards of behaviour. So the table there just provides an overview of disciplinary cases, so misconduct cases, the outcomes for those. We've had 1 formal written warning, 1 dismissal, 1 is in progress, and then a further dismissal based on prior conduct. So that gives us a total of 4 cases. In terms of performance and capability, 2 individuals received a formal written warning. We have 2 cases in progress looking at bullying and harassment, and we've seen 3 grievances, 1 of which is in progress and 2 were not upheld. And members of the rest of the report is very familiar. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that, folks. Well, the recommendations on that are we just scrutinise performance, seek assurances related to performance metrics and keep receiving the reports, I suppose. We happy with that?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. We move on to exclusion of the public. I'll read out the following. To consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the following item in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under Schedule 12A, Part 1, paragraphs 1 and 3. On that basis, having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Thank you. Are we off?